Howdy BookTube! Welcome to the second round of Sexy Saturdays. This one doesn't have like a clever punny subtitle. It's just me coming to you guys recommending some awesome erotica that I think you could check out. There are two that I'm going to recommend today as per usual, one of which I can wholeheartedly recommend to everybody. The other one I can recommend with a whole list full of caveats and exceptions. So feel free to settle in, grab a cup of coffee, stick around, and let's talk sexy time, shall we? The first one I'm going to recommend is Misconduct by Penelope Scott. This book was actually recommended to me by Joss over at Squibbles Reads. We were talking about erotica titles and a couple of various things, and this is one that she brought up as being really well put together, and I really enjoyed it. It's not necessarily the most literary erotica book that I've ever read, but it is incredibly fun. It is between two cishet adults, Easton Bradbury and Tyler Merrick. Easton is a teacher and former tennis pro, and Tyler is a father of one of Easton's students who comes in to have a parent-teacher conference. And as you can probably tell by the picture on the front, things end up getting a little steamy. I thought that this one was incredibly entertaining. There are some moments in it that are incredibly funny. I absolutely loved Easton as our narrator. I thought that she was clever and heartfelt, and she wrestles really well with kind of the taboo of having a physical and romantic relationship with the parent of one of your students. Granted, I'm not a teacher, so I cannot speak to the reality of that scenario, but I feel like it was handled well enough within the context of the book that you can tell that there are definitely some conflicting viewpoints within that. As far as the actual sexy times go, this is on point. Cishet is not necessarily my favorite avenue of erotica, although it comprises quite a bit of the field, but the sex scenes in this were on point. Some of them are slightly more scandalous than others, some of them are slightly more romantic than others, but on the whole, I really, really enjoyed Misconduct. There were a couple of things that I didn't necessarily care for. Although I felt that the conflict between parent-teacher relationships was addressed, I didn't feel it was teased out quite as much as it probably could have been. There were also some of the teenage students in this book who I didn't think were written as realistically as they could have been, but that's a pretty common problem amongst a lot of authors. It is hard to write teenagers without reducing them to kind of slang, talking, really flippant beings, but as they were not the focus of this book, it really did not pull me out this much. Or if teacher-based fantasies are a thing for you, I would definitely recommend checking this out. If you just want some good, fun, entertaining cishet steaminess, this is also one for you. The next one that I have comes with a whole bunch of caveats. It is called Asking for It by Lila Pace, and the first thing we need to talk about, because it is on the back of the book, this book deals with rape fantasy. Now, rape fantasy is a thing that is incredibly common amongst men and women. Do not be ashamed if that is your thing. If you do not understand how rape fantasy can be a thing for other people, you might consider picking up this book and kind of educating yourself a little bit. But as is commonly known, rape is seldom about the actual sex act itself and is completely about power. Vivian Charles was raped, and part of the rape that she went through and the large denial of her rape by her friends and family is that she has kind of turned her sexual proclivities and impulses into ones that deal with rape. And then she meets Jonah Marks, and Jonah Marks also has his own backstory that involves rape and his own struggles with power that leave the two of them essentially creating for each other a safe space in which to explore these fantasies. They lay some ground rules, things that are or are not appropriate, and then essentially several times Jonah surprises or sneaks up on or attacks Vivian and rapes her. Now, it is important, and it is a vital distinction, that all of this is consensual, that there is a safe word, and that if at any point in time it goes from being consensual fantasy to an actual issue for Vivian, they will absolutely stop. There are a couple times in this book where that happens, and where the safe word is used and everything completely stops. It becomes slightly problematic for me in that a love relationship does develop between the two of them. So some lines start to get muddled in terms of the fantasy versus the reality and falling in love with somebody who is basically stage raping you. But I still really found it a good exploration of that particular fantasy, especially because that fantasy is not a fantasy for me. I always think it's important to stretch ourselves and push past our boundaries and kind of explore why and how other people have the proclivities that they do. So just so you know, the sex scenes in this are pretty steamily written, but because they take place within that context of pseudo rape or rape fantasy, they didn't always work for me, but that does not mean that they won't work for you. I recommend picking it up if you are interested or if that is an avenue that you feel needs exploring more. But I feel I don't need to say there are obviously trigger warnings for actual sexual assault in this book. And so if you think that will be a trigger point for you or is just something that emotionally you cannot handle, this might be one to steer clear from. But those are my 2 recommendations for this edition of Sexy Saturday. Please let me know down below what you think, how you're liking the series, if you've read any of these or you have any thoughts. And as always, you can look me up on Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads. I'm all over social media and I'm always here to talk about books. All right, guys, have sexy times and a lovely Saturday.